I'm a man who believed that I died 20 years ago, and I live like a man who is dead already. I have no fear whatsoever of anybody or anything.
Gary Webb. I am an investigative journalist, and in 1996, I wrote a series of stories entitled Dark Alliance, which was about CIA involvement in drug trafficking.
I knew a man who once said death smiles at us all. All a man can do is smile back.
We've both been skull and bone with the secret society. It's so secret we can't talk about it. What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go on.
Sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the rest.
Number 322.
I sad duty to report this afternoon that my friend and colleague Tim Russert collapsed and died early this afternoon.
I may die in this cell tonight or in the arena tomorrow. I am a slave. What possible difference can I make?
And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Hello, welcome back to your favorite live weekly call-in conspiracy show. Hopefully we get the call-in up today. Sorry I wasn't here last week, but I am back. I even didn't do the morning dump this morning because I was feeling under the weather, but I wanted to make sure I was rested up for today. I'm feeling a little bit better. I think by the I'll probably feel sick in the morning again, but all I did was lay around all day, just rested, so that way I was recouped at least for this episode. I'm sure as hell not doing a 3.5 hour episode like y'all did last week, but hey, that when Daddy's gone, they go nuts, I guess. So hey, every now and then, I guess whatever, go for it. I mean, hell, you guys are welcome to do 3.5 hour episodes, but I'm going to bail about 2 deep. But I don't know. I don't know if your wife would appreciate if you're doing the reg Austin.
That one was for me. Honestly, I couldn't stop myself. I without you here to rein me in, I was kind of off the rails. But I think it was an enjoyable episode for sure. I had a good time. I got a lot out that I had been kind of desperate to present in terms of just information I had accumulated over the past few weeks that I couldn't get out on either whatever this is or on Already Dead, and I'm realizing now that I'm beginning to go on interviews and basically not talk about a single bit of information that they essentially originally brought me on to discuss. And this is again my personal plight, but it's something that I think there's measures I can personally take where this won't become too much of a problem. But yeah, it
come
has
back
to
to the morning dump. Get your words out. I was talked about that. I've teased a little bit here and there, but I'm considering eventually. I'm going to do it, but I'm going to split up the brand, and Morning Dump will be its own channel and everything at some point. And I think I'm going to change it to the Daily Dump, and I would like to, whether or not I have other people coming or not, if I have like 1 or 2 other co-hosts that we can kind of swap around, like to make a 7-day a week thing. But you could kind of pick up as many shifts as you wanted. You could set your own hours. You could get your words out.
Right.
It is helpful, I think. It helps collect your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. Anyways, I do think it was useful for you when you had it when you were joining the Morning Dump back in the day.
For sure.
But yeah,
and I honestly think a big part of what I do is I start to subconsciously rush because I'm desperate to get the information out, and I think I'm not considering obviously the pace that I'm taking, thinking through these ideas, and it's something that obviously I can improve on, but I did enjoy talking with Jacob and also just having conversations with the homies obviously that joined us on the show. But But yeah, there was this strange connection in that DOJ letter that references Julian Assange and the family cult, right, of the platinum blonde influence that what was it, Anne Hamilton Byrne or something, right? Who it was like this new age sort of cult that were supposed to become a part of the master race after right, this strange apocalypse ensues, and it just fits the profile of so many different right reference points that we can obviously refer back to in terms of like even just the Temple of Set. But this has been percolating in my mind's eye just because there's so much untapped and left on the table as far as just the Epstein files are concerned, and how much I feel like they're forever relevant. And I mean, obviously, it's almost like a limitless resource that we can tap into at any given moment. But I will say, just as far as just the pressing and timely kind of more relevant events that have been happening over the past week, especially this weekend, well, honestly, on Monday, right? I think it was yesterday that Hitler's birthday, of all days, just in time, the 27th anniversary of Columbine, and we have a sniper open fire from atop an ancient Mexican pyramid, apparently leaving at least one tourist dead, and I think 6 or 7 people were injured, and you know, were taken to the hospital, obviously, for treatment. But what I found to be fascinating is that this individual, alleged perpetrator, Cesar I don't know, Ramirez, he's 27 years old, apparently. And he is the individual who carried out this strange mass shooting on Hitler's birthday, obviously, and the 27th anniversary of Columbine, of all days. But I feel like we should, at the very least, present this strange clip, because, my God, this is you know, information that hasn't very much been covered as far as that I've seen publicly, and I feel like, obviously, maybe world events and things that are taking the priority in the mainstream media spotlight, but still, you would imagine. I will
say real quick, it's not that unusual for Hispanics to idolize Hitler and the Columbine shooters. You'd be surprised how based the Hispanic folks are. They go hard in the paint. They don't realize they are brown. They don't care. They're like, no, I'm just peak white trash. I mean, I'm being a little silly, but at the same time, it is kind of funny. They are a demographic that is far less racially sensitive than probably many other demographics.
And what's crazy to me is the reaction of Claudia Sheinbaum, right, the very white and Jewish Mexican president, who seems to be, obviously, she killed Cash, that we spoke on recently, just in terms of the new age totalitarian technocracy that she's administering and helping facilitate in Mexico at this moment. And I think I actually just saw what facial recognition software is being essentially nationwide in the UK, basically, you know, technologically implemented, I guess, on the ground, right? Which I find to be just interesting timing, right? But anyway, I'll play this clip.
Gunmen who opened fire on tourists atop a pyramid at Mexico's famous Teotihuacan ruins was a Hitler fanatic who posed for pics throwing Nazi salutes, and was found with an AI-generated photo of himself standing with the Columbine school shooters.
What?
It's like a Duke Nukem meme. You ever seen that like Duke Nukem meme where he's? I mean, I don't know. He just says different shit. Right. That looks just like the Duke Nukem meme,
really
kind
does.
of.
And look what it says. But I do find it interesting, the phrase "disconnect and self-destruct," and this is an actual T-shirt that he apparently had custom made, I believe. But yeah, and those obviously are.
Or was that just what AI randomly generated?
Hey, he could have had that specifically generated, but from what I was reading, this is actually a custom T-shirt that he had personally made for himself, and it was through his, you know, veneration and admiration of the Columbine shooters that he went through this process in the first place, and obviously these T-shirts with wrath and natural selection written on them is what Eric and Dylan had changed into just before they committed the shooting, obviously. But strange, right?
According to local officials. Julio Cesar Hasso killed a Canadian tourist and shot several others before he took his own life at the archaeological site near Mexico City on Monday, which was the 27th anniversary of the Columbine High School massacre and also Hitler's birthday. Videos posted on social media show Hasso wearing a black mask with a handgun, pacing around the platform as trapped hostages lay face first on the ground. Hasso started shooting tourists from halfway up the Temple of the Moon, a nearly 2,000-year-old structure and popular tourist attraction that was once used for ritual human sacrifice, just after 11:30 a.m. The 27-year-old left at the terror scene a bizarre AI-generated image of him posing with Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, the two friends who shot up the Colorado high school on April 20th, 1999, killing 14 people and themselves, federal prosecutors said. The shooter also appears to have been a member of a twisted online subculture known as the true crime community.
That is what they're running with. In every publication that I could read, they call it the TCC. Like it's some sort of network of online anons who are essentially operating under this sort of accelerationist playbook. But true crime community as the term, is sort of an umbrella term that they're using to reference almost a direct, well-established network of people as if they're in communication and very well, kind of orchestrating their influence. I find that just obviously hard to believe, right? And it's a strange kind of I think an over-exaggeration in a real way. If this guy is legitimately showing the signs that fits the character profile of the 764 group or whatever, right? And he's a part of some sort of private servers that we should know of. Yeah, you never know. And I'm waiting for those details, but none of those details have been made public at all. So, anyway, they reference a few other things that he had on his person, apparently, when they discovered his dead body.
Which glorifies school shootings, especially Columbine, according to the outlet. In the fake image with the Columbine shooters, Hasso is wearing a shirt with the phrase disconnect and self-destruct, which is associated with the community. Cops also found a brown revolver, a gray knife, and a bag containing various rounds of ammunition near the Mexican national's body after he turned the gun on himself during a shootout with responders. Authorities additionally said they found images of Hasso performing the Nazi salute, which he's been known to do since he was a teenager, Telediario reported. 6 Americans, 3 Colombians, 1 Russian, 2 Brazilians, and 1 Canadian were taken to the hospital. The youngest person injured was 6, and the oldest was 61, authorities said. 7 of those hurt were shot, officials said. It's not clear how others were injured, but tourists could be seen running for their lives in clips posted online once gunfire erupted.
They said a few of the injuries apparently were from people who were overreacting, obviously, and just due to the kind of high impact event that was playing out, and just in regard to the shooting taking place. And so they overreacted and they basically fell as they were already climbing the pyramid when the shooting began. And so you already saw, I mean, that's very steep. So you could imagine, the physical toll of legitimately falling down that pyramid.
You can't win. I have the high ground.
But I mean,
okay, shouldn't laugh. It's a mass shooting, but something about a mass shooting. I mean, the thing you just shoot up, but what? Yeah. Anyway,
but the fact that this site is an ancient ritual human blood sacrifice. That this is what was legitimately practiced at this site in ancient culture, right? As far as even the obsidian blade removing the hearts out of living victims, right? I mean, this is just Apocalypto was playing upon legitimate facts and that have been documented in recorded history, obviously, and not just the Aztecs, but the Maya. I mean, it's a fascinating history, but I'm not surprised whatsoever that if he was in any way practicing this sort of occult ideology and philosophy behind empowering a ritualistic sacrifice, especially a blood sacrifice, on an ancient site such as this that has that cultural connection, you never know what this could represent, right? In context of his sort of belief system. And so I wonder, just knowing the date right? Knowing the timing of these ritualistic, symbolic holidays that are essentially prioritized to obviously engage in these ritualistic, or just blood rituals in general, then it's worthwhile in considering, right? Motives.
We on the date side of things too. I think that's interesting. It's 420. We had 419 as well. Was obviously the Oklahoma City bombing, and then Waco. And there was some interesting stuff. I'm probably going to dig a little bit of this in tomorrow. I don't really have much thoughts on it right now, but funny enough, looks like Kash Patel's FBI is targeting the SPLC right now, and then some of it's weirdly, surprisingly angling for some undue work they were doing for the feds or something, as if they were being which I find that to be particularly, kind of in the vein of stuff that was literally happening in 1995 around the Oklahoma City bombing.
Exactly.
There were all sorts of informants hovering around Elohim City. But I also find it, I don't know if maybe I'm reaching here, but I guess it's just, also a way to kind of mention a similar such thing that happened over in Israel, the West Bank today. So I don't know if 421 is one of these as well, but I know 419's historically, it's also like an occult holiday, I think, as well, or something.
Yeah. There's
420 is as well.
From what I studied with the Son of Sam, just to reinforce what you're saying, I think there's a range of days within a certain, it's like a week or something, right? Okay. Within a certain day of the solstice and things of that nature.
That checks at what I'm getting at then. I bet you, I have a feeling 421 maybe I'm reaching here. Probably am reaching a lot, but I just at least think it's significant. And I'll tell you why. Apparently there was a shooting in Al Mughayir, which I guess is in the West Bank. 2 Palestinians, a kid were killed. And then some of the other kids were injured. There were essentially these settlers who came. It looked like they were like shepherding sheep or some shit. They were kind of like off in the distance, and they're like shooting from a distance at these people. They killed a couple people. Now I'll get into the date significance in a second, but here is you can see right here.
I'm cold.
Yeah, you can see them literally shooting from a distance here. So you get an idea of like what is going on. They literally kind of came in from this like more wilderness area, or shooting towards like a school. So this is a school shooter, Shmuel. I can't even say that; it's so Jewish. Shmuel Wendy. He's a director of the Chomesh Yeshiva. This is who they ended up identifying the shooter as. Funny enough, I was reading up on this. Apparently, obviously this is a lot of this kind of very breaking-ish sort of info. So it may end up not being correct, but as is the tendency when it comes to the Israeli police, they did show up, and I guess I've seen it reported that they actually not only did they actually protected the settlers, because someone I guess tried to respond. One of the Palestinians nearby tried to run towards to assist, and that person got shot in the leg by the Israeli police responding to the situation. So that makes sense. That's totally how that works. But to the date aspect of it, apparently here is the guy. He is on the left. So, for example, in 2019, the settler on the right here, there's another guy in this picture, Eliaf Levy, killed 38-year-old Hamdi Al-Nassan. Then 7 years later, today, one of the guys who was killed in that, the guy on the left in this very picture, Shmuel Wendy, killed the son of Hamdi, who was 13-year-old Awas Al-Nassan. So, I don't know exactly who that person is or the significance of it, but I just, kind of how, even if this is unintentional, just something about even if there's a trauma cycle and just how these things ring. Like here he is sitting at some sort of event right next to this other guy who also carried out some sort of horrendous attack on Palestinians on the same date. And, was it, like I said, 2019. So 7 years ago, he did this exact thing and took out the father. And this guy, 7 years later, took out the son, sniping from a distance into a school. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, that wasn't obviously intentional, right? Is what is the official narrative behind the motivation?
This is just from today. I don't know. It's settler violence, so it kind of like here's the guy. Picture says 1,000 words.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So he's a settler he has I guess running one of the yeshivas or whatever, which I think are like the settlements from my understanding. So yeah.
I saw someone say in the chat he looks like Ari Shafir, and I agree.
Yeah.
But with that, just as far as something that would dovetail in with that interesting story is you saw that Middle East Eye report, right, of the Palestinian detainees who were going on the record talking about
the rape.
bestiality. Yes,
That's right. That's
dude.
we haven't talked about that because I wasn't here and Already Dead last. Because I think it was around that time. But yeah, I've covered in the morning. Yeah, it was wild. Just a ton of reports. You can straight up ask Grok, like, hey, does Israeli police train dogs to rape people? And we're at the point in time where Grok will go, yes, the Israeli military has extensive reports of being raping people with dogs. And you're like, holy fucking shit.
The first thought I had was just I mean, obviously the psychological warfare behind something so sinister, something like bestiality taking place. We've discussed it too often in reference to Marc Dutroux, right? And what happened with Regina Louf and so many of those victims in the X dossier that it was sort of a commonplace, it was very frequent where apparently they would utilize animals in this kind of sinister sexual abuse. I think it was the scarlet snake, right? Was one of the specific, I forget, it was Bernard Weinstein, I think, that was carrying around the scarlet snake at one of the parties where all these children were being abused, and obviously using the snake for that very purpose. And the same goes for strapping in the victims and having dogs essentially have their way with them as well, which is the most disturbing, and reading through those details will never leave you. Right, that's something that stays with you forever, as terrible as it is. But
yeah, and they were raped. One of the reports was a woman who was being raped, and then they were going to use the video. They blackmailed her with the video as part of this whole like systematic torture. God. So like, of one of the videos of her being tortured, raped, or whatever, that was what they're going to use, and they're fairly traditional culture, So something like that. It's awful. I mean, it's like that's something they're. I mean, you're innately going to be probably shamed of that to begin with. Now, also, you're in this honor culture. As a woman, you feel like you might be spoiled or something. So, there's just so much. It's just crazy. By the way, the phone lines are open: 1-833-722-DEAD or 1-833-722-3323. If you don't understand how to do the old numbers to letters trick, if you're not used to the way phones used to be. But by the way, we have one of our resident anti-Semitic experts in our private chat that chimed in. Apparently, he clarified what a yeshiva is. It's a Jewish religious school. So I would assume that little event they were both talking. I'd bet both of these guys were high up members of a yeshiva. So he is someone of some. He was a leader of a Jewish religious school. So that is the individual who then, which I don't know if you saw the clip of Chuck Schumer recently. Did you see where he just straight up fucking said it?
Yeah,
like he just
said it out loud,
they don't believe in the Torah. The Torah says it's ours, and this is why we will. It's ours. So this is why they will all until they understand it's ours.
Right.
So,
You saw that guy and that Israeli soldier that was caught on camera smashing the head of the Jesus statue in southern Lebanon. I think Netanyahu originally came out like right after that went public and posted a statement basically where he says he's stunned and saddened by the image in which an IDF soldier was photographed taking an axe to the face of a torn down statue of Jesus Christ. And then today, it was like 4 hours ago, I saw the report that Israeli soldiers caught smashing Jesus statue sentenced to 30 days in prison. So they got their consequence. They're going to serve a month in prison where I'm sure they get to rape a Palestinian or something. It's like the most ridiculous kind of notion that they're actually serving some sort of sentence and consequence.
Well, the ones who we had that whole blow up about recently where they raped the guy behind the riot shields, and they ended up having the whole rioting for the right to rape over there in Israel, and we had some crazy clips coming out of the Knesset with their legit politicians debating whether they're allowed to rape Palestinians. And those guys are back in service. They're just like, I think it was like a week or two ago that it was like, yep, we're back in service. They're back in there. And that's actually right about the same time that these reports came out that kind of like, oh, that was the vanilla shit that we got a little bit of a taste there. It is way worse than that and is systematic. So, yeah.
I definitely...
These yeshivas are a problem, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is just it's just another blatant example of the kind of just seeing this isn't normal in terms of now I understand, like, historically speaking, right? Anytime there's an obvious ongoing conflict, you have tragedies and war crimes and just sinister, but not systematically entrenched war crimes. Right. That is absolutely kind of now, I'm not saying it's unprecedented. Obviously, this has happened over the course of history, but I would say ethically problematic at the very least. Right. But yeah, I don't know. I think Netanyahu is just kind of I saw they had reignited the interesting investigation into him apparently, and so it's back on the table, and who knows what will come of that. But I think it was Miriam Adelson. You saw that clip that went viral, right, where she's like, if that ever goes public, I'll essentially they'll kill me, something to that extent. And I thought it was interesting, the reference of that. It was like around the time Tucker came out with the BB files, right, where and that was kind of drawing attention. But I did see. Now I wanted to share this with you personally because I thought it was it's profound in terms of the connection and especially the timing. But I told JJ and Jacob this on Friday, I think it was. So it turns out, and I think honestly that how I was originally introduced to this specific connection was from the homie that tags us all the time on Twitter, right? No Lotus or whatever. And so it was in February 1988, and this is legitimate. Like I looked this all up and confirmed it, and I'll have to show you the pictures real quick on the screen because it was February of '88 when Epstein began managing the personal and business finances of Les Wexner, right? Now, this is the exact same month that the Wexner Heritage Foundation held a national fundraising retreat for donors in Palm Beach, Florida, titled Models of Ethical Leadership. The keynote speaker, of course, at this retreat happened to be one Bibi Netanyahu, which is just how in the fuck can you kind of conceptualize this?
Hey, Melania said the Palm Beach circles, it's just very common to be socializing, mixing and matching, That's just how the groove is over there in the Palm Beach. It's whatever.
Right. Yeah. Now, the models of ethical leadership. And if you look into this weekend retreat, you look at what they were focusing on. All right, this is their morning schedule, Shabbat morning service, the two rabbis speak. Then down here, the manipulation of judicial power. You have another professor, ethics and deception. What is different about Jewish ethics? A Mishnah study led by Professor Michael Chernick. The ethical dilemmas of kingship. So these are either professors or rabbis that are specifically presenting these kind of lines of interest in the strange event that was being hosted. So again, I just felt like looking into what they were specifically prioritizing, having this discussion on, right, it was worthwhile and kind of pointing out. So anyway. Not at all surprised.
Real quick, on that note of kind of, I guess maybe not so much on the Epstein angle there, but did you see that Hungary, essentially, it was actually funny right around the time JD went to go completely bungle the Iran deal. It kind of looked like even more of a cuck bitch than he did before. He fucked up. He flubbed the bag over in Hungary because he had actually just been over in Hungary trying to usher favor for Orban for his election, and apparently he fell he fell big time flat. He's one of their pretty big, he's a pretty big Jewish, pretty big Zionist. So,
Isn't that
and he's
where
pretty corrupt. Go ahead.
The new president that just took power?
He said he'd fucking arrest him. And it's funny too. Apparently, the reporting, I guess Netanyahu claimed at one point that, oh yeah, he invited me to come down for whatever. But then like there's also reporting, but he's like, yeah, but like I guess there's almost the implication that like that's a complete misrepresentation. Like he did invite him, but like in the sense of like, come on over and we'll arrest you.
That's so funny,
it's the reporting, like the behind the scenes. It seems to imply perhaps that like Netanyahu misrepresented it. Like, oh, I got invited. And it's like, yeah, you did, but it's more of a funny like you got invited because if you come over, we'll arrest you. Because I guess this guy's all about anti-corruption and is like, I think they've kind of that's become synonymous on the world stage with corruption. And that's part of why Orban got booted out there, despite having this like overt, like the establishment of the world backing him to like a crazy degree. Like we had J.D. Vance literally, speaking to crowds for Orban, trying to get them to stumping for the vote. So like being like, oh, if you care about truth, American way, yada yada yada, you'll vote for Orban or whatever. And completely flubbed that up. So which probably for the better, but I just find it funny that we have. In the world stage, I mean, I really do feel like we have, while it does feel like nothing's ever really happening, in truth, everything is actually ratcheting up. But I also think the paradigm shifted, much like it did with the Russia-Ukraine war, in that we've kind of insulated and kind of created, essentially gestating new superpowers. And honestly, it's kind of, I don't necessarily want to root for Iran, but I definitely don't want them to get fucked up now because they've essentially displayed to the world what controlling the Strait of Hormuz can do. And if what Israel wants occurs, Israel will have control of the Strait of Hormuz. So not only will they be a deranged nuclear power, they will have access to like one of the like main veins of oil and commerce in the world. So could be a fucking problem.
Yeah, no kidding. But I definitely, what that reminds me of, just as far as the geopolitical chess match and how they kind of push these pieces around and play the game of the violent coup d'etat, overthrowing regimes and things of that nature, nation building or regime change operations, obviously. But it reminded me of, so I went back through these details regarding Jonestown through the lens of what you had introduced me to and we had discovered in our series with the Shalom Project, right? And because if you remember, what you had introduced me to was the Colston Westbrook connection to being involved directly with the Shalom Project.
I think I heard that from Jacob, actually, if I recall correctly. Dude, maybe I'm wrong.
It's a fact of life for sure. I think Jacob was obviously on that show with JJ the other night, and I brought this up as well because I found just in terms of this quote that I found from letters from Donald Cinque de Vries, right, that essentially referenced directly to that of Colston Westbrook. And if you remember, Donald de Vries is the individual who ran the SLA, right, which was an obvious cutout, the Symbionese Liberation Army, after his time at Vacaville, where he was obviously experimented upon through behavioral modification experimentation programs that were at Vacaville and very well established there through the California State Prison Complex, who were basically, they had been infiltrated, but through a negotiation project, they were well aware of this fact. It was just covert, right? It was a clandestine operation. So you had CIA operatives who were infiltrating the California State Prison Complex and them staffing Vacaville Penitentiary as basically prison guards, right? But in reality, they're active and operating domestic CIA agents who are essentially, operating in this strange kind of plausible deniability, clandestine playbook in a way, right? That they're trying to exploit. And what was interesting is that I go back through and I see that there's this letter that had basically a few different letters. And this was referenced in a book, right, that had been written by this private investigator, Hadley, I believe was his name. And he was the individual who's Lake Hadley, I think was the name of the PI. And it was really up to him because no one was honestly investigating this case. And obviously, it connects to the Patty Hearst abduction, who Congressman Leo Ryan himself says was directly a victim of MK Ultra driven underground, and that she was victimized by those very same sophisticated techniques through the CIA's underground operation. So I find out that citing these letters from Donald Cinque DeFries himself, basically he says while he was at Vacaville in 1970, he was recruited by an alleged CIA operative named Colston Westbrook to lead a behavioral modification experimental unit. DeFries began operating as a double agent for Westbrook and the CIA and for the California Department of Corrections and the Bureau of Criminal Intelligence and Investigation. So the fact that he legitimately said that in his own words in a letter is very just like eye-opening to me. This was the conclusion I already had essentially come to, right? But this is obviously further reinforcement and kind of a direct line of credibility, in my opinion, to this being the reality. And so Westbrook obviously was directly involved with the Shalom Project, and what I discovered with this is obviously the Angolan rebels, and these this is their direct line into George Philip Blakey, who was the individual who acquired the lease and the property and the funds to acquire the Jonestown property, right, for Jim Jones. So what's obviously fascinating is that I think Mae Brussel reported
real quick,
on.
sorry, I want to highlight a well-known Jewish concept, especially in Kabbalah. I find it interesting here, kind of what we're needling at a little bit, is the golem. You've heard of the golem, right, Austin?
Oh,
yeah. They create this golem, this non-thinking entity that they are able to control. There's a little bit kind of almost like a tale to it, like a kind of a theme throughout Tales of Golem. I think even like the supposed one that was created or whatever, is that like if you don't turn it off at night or something or whatever, it's the idea of like accidentally creating something that runs amok. Like a lot of people equated it to things like AI, but it's also like things like runaway, like trauma cycles, stuff like that. Like these, creating, if you're trying to create these, I don't know, Manchurian candidates, is that not the same thing as kind of like a golem? This thing that you have a tenuous control on, that if you aren't diligent, can easily get away from you. I don't know. There's something to that, I think, a little bit. But go on.
100%, man. I mean, that was in the I've referenced it a few times, but the Project Monarch article written by Ron Patton, I believe was his name, where he talks about all the 149 various sub-projects of MK Ultra and kind of traces it back through, the evolution through the Anglo Alliance, the Anglo-American establishment of the Pilgrim Society, obviously being heavily involved with the Society of the Cincinnati and things. But the point being is that all of this was very much integrated by these secret fraternal organizations and the Alpha Lodges of Freemasonry, and all of these connections were essentially kind of they were all sort of overlapping, right, in terms of organized crime syndicates, as we've seen with the French Connection and the Sicilian Mafia, right, being heavily involved. It's just another example of how this is kind of like they coexist in this way to prop up the network and facilitate it and clearly remain hidden from public view, obviously. But what you just reminded me of was obviously there's this strange portion in that article where he talks about the butterfly being the symbol of corrupt flesh and the angel of death, and it goes Mangala basically using this Gnostic artwork to portray crushing the butterfly. And I had actually gotten hit up by someone who I very much appreciate every time she's reached out to me, because she seems to be in this field of just the scientific field of psychiatry in a way, right? Just understanding it from a scientific viewpoint. And I found it interesting because she's always trying to basically expose me to the scientific perspective of dissociative identity disorder. And I found, it's it's amazing and very valuable. And I hope to God that I can have a more long form conversation with her at some point, even if it is just privately, so I can kind of understand it, a little bit more for myself. But she reached out and she mentioned the Jesuit proverb, right? Of give me a kid at 7 and I'll tell you who the man is. And I thought that was fascinating, just in itself.
Yeah.
And then it goes on to reference DID requiring childhood trauma to occur before the ages of 7 to 9, around then, right? And these traumatic events essentially prohibit the mind from going through the natural process of solidifying into one core sense of self. I never really thought through it in that way. Right, which it makes all the sense in the world, right? It derails the natural process of the core self and identity materializing consciously, right? And especially for you to like legitimately reflect on it with an internal dialogue and understand. So this is how they can essentially separate through and create the altars is through destroying that natural process at this specific evolution of the mind. It's
a little bit of a horizontal concept here, but kind of going back to the Kabbalah gets really caught up in the idea of, I guess you could call it like word magic. And you can kind of crudely understand this to kind of be the idea of like how did God, even in the normal Christian understanding, he spoke things into the world. Like he spoke, through his words, he created the world. So it's kind of the same idea. They think that that words have power, and so that they're trying to. And I think, as I was thinking about the golem too, kind of the story of how the golem runs amok. There's like one story. I think it's like life and death. I forget what specific fucking language or whatever it was in, but essentially there's like written on the golem's forehead. I think it's like life or something to like wake it up, but like. The idea was he's supposed to be like fucking gremlins or whatever, never past whatever, always turn it off at night or whatever, rub off the thing. And I guess the idea is like they rubbed it, changed the symbol to where I guess because it's kind of like close, and so it became death instead or something like that. I'm totally probably butchering this, but either way, the idea of the words, and if we are talking altars, we're talking. What do they always say? Trigger words, so that is totally. Yeah. I mean, I think there's something to that about like speaking things into existence, having, the word, the power over things through the power of your will, your voice. So I know that it's something to that. I think that's interesting because that is like, I don't know, I'm totally just, I feel like we're almost just word associating here, but I don't know, maybe we're stepping in something. You tell us, our resident anti-Semitic expert in the private chat. You guys are missing out if you aren't patrons.
I will say that it was within that context of I believe the Kabbalistic tree of life is mentioned in the programming of the altars, and basically they essentially have internal programmers which oversee as gatekeepers as far as the altars are concerned, which is apparently the way they reference the programming. And this is obviously when Ron Patton kind of leans into the notion that this could potentially be demonic possession, right, in a real sense of the word. And if you think this through, which is fascinating to me. But anyway, basically saying that you have the internal images, right, of the if just knowing that what's the process where, like in Eyes Wide Shut, right, where obviously they pull your eyelids open and they force you to watch these what are the images called that are racing through essentially and supplanting
subliminal messages.
Yes, subliminal. Thank you.
Yeah.
The subliminal messages is essentially what they were utilizing in Eyes Wide Shut, obviously, and then we know that's a part of the process as far as the techniques they utilize. And so, knowing this, obviously, I think is important. And then the notion of these internal images, basically, that victims and survivors are allegedly, it seems to be this kind of commonplace reference point for many of these victims that have a similar perspective as far as what they endured and the images that they tend to see in terms of the programming, which is very interesting. These internal images that apparently they reference are trees, right? The Kabbalistic tree of life and these adjoining root systems, infinity loops being one of the things that they apparently see. ancient symbols, letters, spider webs, mirrors or glass shattering, masks, castles, mazes, aliens, obviously, which is very interesting. I think many people who have legitimately been experimented upon have equated this with extraterrestrial, exposure, right? That they've had an alien experience when, in reality, I believe they were probably in a scientific laboratory.
Can you imagine? Like we talked about the Jewish rape prisons or Israeli rape prisons earlier. Can you imagine if you got black bag in the middle of the night and then people wearing fucking silly masks did literally what they did there to them, or just something like just even as simple as that? Like you don't even need advanced techniques, and you can totally. I really don't feel like it'd be that hard to, I don't know, create the circumstances of which someone would think they got abducted, especially if you introduce things like drugs and stuff. But you could probably do it without even needing any sort of, mind-altering substances.
Dude, they say that the main internal structures that they rely upon for the programming basically has it's a system that has a shape like a double helix that consists of 7 levels, which is the Kabbalistic tree of life we were just referencing earlier. And I believe the adjoining root system is definitely a part of how you blend together the programmed altars as well and can trigger them. This is, again, I'm attempting to, I am no expert. I'm only trying to overexpose myself to many of these various techniques so I can kind of conceptualize it from my own self and apply it moving forward, because it is fascinating as hell. And I think to, basically cause an individual and drive them to dissociate is a very interesting process, as much as it's sinister and tragic and disgusting to imagine. It's something you should understand, I think, at the very least, especially if you want to speak on it. But anyway, there was one thing I was desperate to tell you, because obviously we've had the conversation so many times in regard to Jonestown. Is the only reason I brought it up. So I found out that basically Jim Jones' entire cover as a communist was basically a fictional manufacturing, a presentation on behalf of the CIA. And it's essentially, he was meant to be remembered as this by the public, right? And I believe that I think it was in the last 6 months before the massacre takes place, he goes out of his way to basically provide the public with this impression that he's a communist. And so, of course, the temple aide, Deborah Layton, who is married to George Philip Blakey, obviously, right? And they went out of their way not to provide her last name, especially when she wrote a book on the subject following the massacre. And I believe it was her father, if you remember correctly, because basically her father was Lawrence Layton, who was the former chief of biochemistry and director of chemical warfare at the U.S. Army Dugway Proving Ground in Utah. And so obviously that's very important, his role in the 1950s. And I think George Philip Blakey worked for UNITA, right, and was very much a part of the Shalom Project and was basically helping facilitate that operation at the time. But it turns out that essentially Deborah Layton, and she leaves in May of 78, I believe it was, just before the massacre and the revolutionary mass suicide takes place. She leaves. She goes back to the States. Very convenient for her. And then she just so happens to be the individual who seeds the narrative into public consciousness that something tragic is about to transpire in Guyana, right?
Turning off the golems. You don't want to be there in case one runs amok,
It's fascinating. And she apparently during this time, she also, and considering who she is, she courts the Soviet and Cuban embassies in Guyana and basically helps plan the local May Day celebrations. Now, Russian language classes were being compulsory. It was compulsory, basically, and being taught by force to Jonestown residents at the time, because Jones was running with this narrative to the average, peasant members of the People's Temple that were being brutalized in a way that basically they would escape, if you remember, right, to Russia, and that they would be able to provide the Soviets and Russian intelligence with a code, and this code would then obviously trigger some sort of rescue mission, which again is just a ridiculous, I think, a false narrative, sort of. Although I will say that he was programming many of the People's Temple members to embrace this narrative, but it was all basically a ruse, right? And this association, it was intended to cause the Communist Association to the People's Temple and Jonestown specifically, which would very much become, kind of popular opinion following the events. And still to this day, I think many people are under that impression. And essentially what it was supposed to do is drive further into the subconscious minds of the public this sort of left-wing communist government in order to basically discredit them and the left in the U.S. for, Jones, just considering that Jim Jones was registered as a Republican for years. And his, basically, according to Michael Myers, the author, his politics were basically Bible Belt, KKK member, son of a Midwestern, right. His father was a member of the local KKK chapter, right? And if you remember, it was Jim Jones who was abducting cats, right, his neighbors' cats, and sacrificing them in mock funeral rituals that he would then provide the eulogies for, right, to to these weird kids in his neighborhood. But yeah, obviously that's fascinating. But what I found to be extraordinary is the proof of Gladio concept, which is playing out in this context. And apparently Guyana, and we mentioned the bauxite mines that were geographically in proximity to the property in the remote jungles of Guyana. Obviously, the British Black Watch troops happen to be, conducting these strange sort of, just strategic operational practices in the area, right? Which was interesting in its own right, but essentially what you discover is that this was viable and a vital economic resource to the U.S. establishment at the time, and especially with the bauxite being a priority, apparently. And they had this Air Force base that apparently it was called Atkinson Field. And I saw photos of this. And basically this is where Air Force officers were carrying out photo mapping of the entire region. And it turns out that Jim Jones was tasked with recruit by the agency, and it legitimately names his boss at a certain point and who he was essentially being handled by directly, which was a CIA officer. And this was as early as 1962. The massacre doesn't transpire till 78, right? And this is while his congregation is still in Indiana. They haven't even gone to Ukiah yet. So they're not even in California at this point. And he's telling his congregation that he's basically helping impoverished citizens and, in South America. And if you remember, there's like a one sentence brief aside that, oh yeah, by the way, he had traveled to Guyana once before whenever he was down in South America that time. Right. And so obviously you pull back, or you just pull that thread a little bit. And it turns out he's sent there to recruit and train a group of Black Guyanese mercenaries who were to incite race riots and labor strikes intended to cripple the current government, which was Jagan's government at the time. And he was supposed to use his doctrine of racial integration, what he called his rainbow family, obviously, to essentially instigate these race riots.
Which the rainbow family that you're talking about, like he almost had like a caste system. He like the underlings of which were mostly black, and then you had I forget what he called them. There was like the something guard. He had a name for them. You might remember.
Brigade.
Red Brigade. I was gonna say Red Guard, but I know that's something else. That's years of lead shit. So the Red Brigade, and that was like his elite crew that kind of, I guess you could say, his staff, administrators, security, yada yada yada, and they were kind of seemed like to be a lot of past military Green Beret-ish kind of guys that so kind of looking at it, knowing that site was also the same place they ran Operation Shalom that Westbrook was at, that ended up being the guy running the SLA over here in the United States, the most obvious front group ever. It kind of starts to look a little bit like something else is fucking going on here. So,
100%, man. And it was basically described as the perfect disguise that Jim Jones had manufactured for the agency, that would essentially not only instigate the race riots, but the People's Temple would provide the necessary missionary cover, as well as obviously becoming this kind of interesting conduit to filter money from the U.S. to the Guyanese rebels. So this this is long standing as early as 1961, and anonymous donations at the time were streaming into his Indianapolis church, right? And for being forwarded to Jones, who was distributing the money in any way he felt was necessary, obviously, and this was in order to plan the civil disturbances in the region. This is the Gladio playbook, man. I mean, beyond a shadow of a doubt. And he tells his Indianapolis congregation that it's all in order to feed the poor. His immediate supervisor, in order to coup d'etat Jagan's government in Guyana, was CIA agent Richard Welch, is his name. Now, Richard Welch would later be assassinated in the mid-1970s before the massacre takes place, after becoming the CIA station chief in Greece. Welch is the individual who originally introduced Jim Jones to Forbes Burnham, who was apparently the CIA's candidate. Now, this is upon his arrival in Georgetown that this is already orchestrated. It was in February of 62 that this sort of Gladio years of lead, inciting domestic destabilization and labor strikes and things of that nature, really began to go. I mean, full steam ahead at that point, right? Green light, go. And they were burning down cinemas, restaurants owned by East Indians, attacking pro-Jagan politicians. And this is when Jagan himself is forced to declare a state of emergency and call in British troops to allegedly quell the disturbance, which obviously was essentially his regime was overthrown in a very short amount of time following this. And it was basically a CIA whistleblower in a diary blew the whistle, right? And Philip Agee or Agee, I'm not entirely certain how to pronounce it, but I've referenced him many times, I think, not only in the Jonestown context, because he's been kind of like a very interesting, reliable source from within, right? Who kind of shed light on the operational practices of the agency. So take it for what it is. He's a CIA dissident, but he wrote a book, right? I believe Inside the Company, a CIA diary is what it's called. And it's about the Burnham's election as prime minister in December of 64 being achieved largely due to CIA operations to strengthen the anti-Jagan trade unions, which apparently fomented the race riots and at least helped in a very real way facilitate them. And also removed the fear that Jagan would turn British Guyana into another Cuba, apparently, or something is what they claimed the cultural reaction was in a way. I don't know, but it was like until 1985 that Burnham was in charge, right? Forbes Burnham until his death at that time, and I believe this is when he was obviously working on behalf of the CIA as a puppet the entire administration throughout his time as dictator, and this was in no way an opposition to capitalist imperialism on the world stage as we were intended to believe, right? And I think throughout his administration, he even authorized the complete totalitarian physical surveillance and wiretapping of any political opponents, the direct stoking right of heightened tensions through the vision at least being the strategic outcome, really prioritizing racism, right? Just dividing Guyana at the time essentially along racial lines, right, is what they were really attempting to achieve. So there's one last point and then I'll stop, and we don't necessarily have to get into mercenaries in Angola and everything else that really details the reality of Shalom and how Philip Blakey and Colston Westbrook were working in tandem. This was documented in detail. But you see, basically there's this fascinating quote All right, and it's in regard to a speech from 1966, and this is just before, obviously, within 2 years, you have the out and out priority targeted assassinations being hyperactivated, especially within the domestic U.S. You have MLK, Malcolm X, RFK, all being unfortunately, gifted, right? Just this sort of, obviously you already know the assassinations that took place, but the point being is that the timing of this is interesting. And apparently the speech was given at the University of West Indies by Chetty Jagan, right? Who's this former leader of Guyana. And this is while he's accusing Burnham of being a stooge of Uncle Sam during this speech. And he says, quote, who cuts deals with Washington with the result that Guyana is now a creature of Uncle Sam. And I mean, just knowing, and we talked about this on our series, obviously Burnham's wife, I believe it was, and the deputy prime minister named Ptolemy Reed, they both were among the very first people who responded at the scene of the People's Temple Agricultural Project in Guyana when the Jonestown massacre took place. And when they returned to the capital, they had $1 million in cash, jewelry, and gold, essentially, that they had taken and seized from the buildings and also the dead bodies as well. And so this clearly was just this hyperactivated Operation Gladio at the time that I think was really kind of a glimpse into what Condor became, right? As far as just realizing the Pinochet government and what Colonia Dignidad was. This is Colonia Dignidad, right? This became, I think, so many of those bodies that were just accumulating with the rising death toll and claiming the medical examiner Leslie Mutu can't count and the Guyanese officials were inept. They took the opportunity full force, and this wasn't just tying off loose ends for the American MK Ultra operations and things of that nature that were being overexposed, but this, I also believe, became some sort of concentration camp, prison environment for any dissidents or political dissidents in Guyana to effectively be tortured and potentially even programmed or killed, right? So at least that was the case in Colonia Dignidad, is mass death. So I would not at all be shocked if that was sort of a commonplace status quo playbook, operationally speaking, in kind of fully exploiting Guyana and Jonestown for what it was,
Yeah, I mean, the more we look behind the veil, what the fuck's going on there, looks like there definitely was some wild shit. But with that, I think we're probably at a good spot to go to intermission. I can already see some of the patrons ready to come up, have some interesting topics. Apparently there was a suicide in the UFO community on 420, so I'm interested in that. We also got our resident anti-Semite, I think, might join us too. So looking forward to what we get into in the after portion here, talking to the patrons. And then whatever we're not able to get to in the main show, we'll probably shoot the shit with them in the after show which is only for patrons. So pay up, pours, whether that be to me or Austin. But with that, guys, we'll see you in a few minutes. Enjoy this beautiful bean footage, this intermission from our great producer, Jacob.
For the final lecture came here for the one derivative of humanity, the one I abhor. I need a minute to eliminate forever what the everyday bullshit that I did you out on. Your impossible ego fuck is like a megalomaniacal jab on my jaw. You fucking touch me, I will rip you apart. I'll reach in and take a bite out of the shit you call a life. I don't mind being awkward, ridiculed, made to feel minuscule. When you consider the source, it's got a bit of fall. The only thing you really know about me is that's all you'll ever know. I know
We're back, bitches. I don't know why am I on the other side now? All right, put it back. No. There we go. All right, that was weird. All right, we're back, everybody. Let's get right into we had another topic we were talking about getting in, but I think maybe we should say that for next week. Maybe refine that a little better, unless it comes up naturally. But we do have some interesting patrons' thoughts in here. I want to start off with who was it? Who had the David Wilcox wanted to talk about it? Who was that? That was your mom. Let's get your mom in here. Your mom, you ready to go? I'm pulling you on anyways. Let's do it. Your mom, what's up, brother?
Good evening.
What's up, buddy?
What's up, dude? Good.
Yeah, so your boy, your resident 2012 Mayan calendar schizo bro, trained and educated by Esalen associated Gaia network psychopaths, has unalived himself on 420 in, wait for it, Boulder County, Colorado, actually right above Boulder, very close where I used to live in Netherlands. So that's a little close to home, but yeah, he told his fans that he was having like a rough week or whatever, and he chose to do it on 420. It's a little on the nose. I don't know.
I know this guy is now. This guy wasn't he one of the Ancient Aliens guys?
Yeah, exactly. He was.
That's
one of
all
the
I really
OGs.
know him from. Yeah.
He said he was like the reincarnation of Edgar Casey. He said that aliens turned him into a banana. Like he said some crazy shit over the years. So,
I was literally just about to say, oh yeah, I remember him being one of the more like rational ones.
No, bro, this guy's it's one of the disinfo guys, right? Like he'll say 3% truth and then 97% bullshit to throw everybody off. But
was he exposed for that at some point? Was he one of the ones? Because I know we've had multiple revelations throughout the years that have like basically confirmed these guys being like disinfo agents, like multiple ones of them.
Well, I think the biggest tell is that 2012 happened and we didn't all die. So I would say he's been exposed. But yeah, it's everywhere. I just think that like lower level people like that, when they start to kind of burn out, they become more useful as like a distraction tool, and they get unalived by a cult. And Boulder has lots of cults, especially in the mountains above it. So if anybody remembers, it's actually in the Epstein files too. The DOJ was investigating it because one of the fucking drivers for one of I don't even know if I should say this. Well, whatever, it's in Epstein files. One of Mitt Romney's relatives was a young person in the Boulder area, and apparently a chick that he was with overdosed, and they got rid of the body right above Boulder, and that one of the guy that was posting the shit on 4chan like posted the grid coordinates about where the body was buried. So a lot of such shit happens in Boulder, man. It's not just John Benet Ramsey. I mean, the NIST Center is there, which is like an underground facility. They study like nuke shit. One of the atomic clocks that all the satellites are fucking synced to, I think, is in Boulder. It's just like all feds and glowies. So it's all bad. But yeah, R.I.P. Edgar Casey. Sorry, dude.
Well, that's a rough one. Well, any thoughts on that? Was there anything weird about the death? I mean, it seems like kind of a semi-legit suicide. Not
like
legit,
people,
but you know what I mean.
Well, the next of kin have yet to confirm this, so it's kind of interesting. I'm looking at it now, and it looks like you just have essentially it stems from an online report that references the sheriff's office incident from April 20th from Boulder County. That is where the alleged rumors are stemming from. Then involved a man in a mental health crisis who died by suicide at a residence matching Wilcox's known address in Nederland, Colorado. So it seems like it's accurate.
Yep.
No name released yet. Coroner pending next of kin notification. Wilcox recent YouTube live stream April 17th. An active online presence show nothing of the sort. Someone wrote, "I do not believe for 1 minute that David Wilcox killed himself." Obviously, they were mentioning that it's notable that there's no official confirmation about the death. Apparently, he specifically said, I believe it was him who he had written, "Either way, I want you all to know how much I love and appreciate you. Always remember that the Creator is within and we live in a loving universe. I'm grateful to you for all of your love, care, and support. So I don't know. Who knows? It seems like speculation, I guess, until we get official confirmation from the next of kin. But it looks
That's
like
pretty standard. Like they do that. They always wait to reveal it until they talk to the next of kin. Sorry, Austin.
no, you're good. I mean, it makes sense, but it does look like his wife had an interesting IMDb. Looks like they got married in 2017. They split up in 2021. Elizabeth was known, she was a spiritual creator and teacher known for, quote, priestess path, my friends.
I think she was associated with the John of God cult too. She had
There
pictures
you
with
go,
her.
buddy. Now that's interesting.
Just saying.
So, Wilcock has had an ascension message for a while, positing that humanity is on the verge of a major shift. It sounds occult, for sure.
Yeah, I mean that whole Gaia network. The fuck is the name of that family? It'll come to me. But that whole Gaia network is just, it's all glowy channeling, new age, fucking Blavatskyism.
Right.
They're all psychos, dude.
Was he involved in like the alien cult stuff too? Is that
Yeah,
So
exactly.
okay, that totally
channelers.
checks out. Yeah, okay. I wonder if they'll find a way to ham-fist this into like all the the UFO / whatever scientists that have gone missing recently.
Exactly, bro.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's why I brought it up. I think all this shit is a distraction against the failure of the wars in Iran getting set up. And I just think these lower level actors, like eventually when you're starting to fade, you're just more useful as a temporary distraction. And I think all those scientists that disappeared, I think a lot of them were already like assets to be used at a later date if they needed a distraction for something. I think they plan ahead. Cause like, bro, I watched one of the fucking videos of one of the alleged silent scientists that went missing. And she's talking about like anti-gravity shit. And she's not speaking in a way that you would think would be consistent with the scientists. Like somebody that's educated can explain the theory and like put it out there. And she's talking about how it got released 4 times and they got visited by men in black suits and shit. I'm just like, dude, this is all propaganda bullshit. It's all distraction tech. Like,
yeah,
I feel like it's just ramped up. So that's all I had to say. Shout out Bobo. We miss you, brother. Keep pushing. You're almost out. He's working really hard for his family right now. So shout out Bobo.
Hell yeah, Bobo. Work hard, brother. Well, I guess we'll let you go. We got I guess we got Jared in the wings. I don't know if he's gonna. Are you good to join us, Jared? I'll just go ahead and try to bring you up. I don't know if you are there or not. All right, we'll kick you off now. Your mom. Appreciate you joining us today.
Love you guys. Fuck the feds.
Love you too, brother.
Fuck the feds for sure. Man, definitely some thoughts there. But I don't know. I guess I don't want to get too deep into some other stuff. I think there might be something to those people, but now that I think about it, it does like sound like kind of a Hollywood tale. But all right, let's bring Jared in. Jared's at work right now. Oh, well then who the fuck else is coming on? I guess we could bring him back on. Jared, you made it sound like we're gonna go on. John Black, did you want to come on? Otherwise, I guess me and you, Austin, we can talk about. You had some ideas about Steve Bannon and tying this into some 17th, 18th century French stuff, the Epstein files.
I don't think it's this loose tie-in connection that it might have seemed like privately when I was talking to you about it, because I swear to you,
no, it fits with what we were talking about before. If it wasn't that I knew it would be another half hour, I was going to segue into that. It would have fit well with the theme stuff we were talking about before the end of before intermission.
I think I could efficiently do this, honestly, and it wouldn't take too long at all, because legitimately the only thing that would take any time is the newspaper reference, which I do think is just very worthwhile, especially understanding this kind of again, the cultural impact, right, and the influence of this legitimately being systematically entrenched and extending into modern day. And as far as I believe, this network is one and the same. And I believe they practice fundamentally the same sort of occult ideology as far as the ritualistic child abuse that they engage in, and especially the interesting component of legitimately, just as far as essentially deflowering a virgin, right? Being of the utmost priority as far as what they were practicing at the time, which I do think is relevant as well as to the Epstein network, which I find interesting. The concept of the blue butterfly, obviously, and the baby making factory at Zorro Ranch, and the harvesting of the eggs in some of the female victims, and also the concept of, if you remember, Regina Louf having her child taken from her while she gave birth in a torturous environment where they're actually abusing her while she's giving birth. Then they remove the child and they take her away from Regina, never to see her again until a few, basically, I can't remember if she was 3 years old or if she was still an infant. I can't recall her age at this point, but I do think it was 3 years, if I remember correctly. But either way, she hadn't seen her child since she gave birth. And it was at the ASCO factory of the films where allegedly she was being abused. And if you remember, basically her abusers were saying, if she passed out due to the level of abuse and torture she was enduring, then they would essentially punish her by sacrificing her recently born child, infant child, in a ritualistic a snuff film, right? Which is exactly what Regina Louf referred to the ASCO factory as, is the factory of the films, right? And it wasn't only Regina who made this claim that this is where they were systematically operating the snuff enterprise for the Dutroux network. But so this is, I think, very relevant. And if you remember, we had talked about the Ninth Circle, right, which was this sex sacrificing cult that ties in the Vatican, the disappearance and abduction and ritual sacrifice of Emanuela Orlandi in, I believe, the summer solstice, June 22nd, 1983. And what's interesting is that it was in the DOJ files that I had mentioned. Obviously, Epstein is corresponding with Steve Bannon, and he mentions this secret satanic society, right, in this interesting communication, an email, I believe it was. I have it right here, actually. And Epstein encourages Bannon, he says, to come to him, right? That was the context. You will have to come, stay 8 to 10 days. If you're going to play here, you'll have to spend time. Europe by remote doesn't work. Lots and lots of FaceTime and hand-holding. Steve Bannon responds, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter." And then Epstein responds, "Ninth Circle." So now, instantly I thought Ninth Gate, Roman Polanski, we went into this, right? The occult symbolism involved in this. But then I discovered this direct connection to the court case, the international court investigation into Pope Leo and his complicity in this ritual murder of children and disappearance of Emanuela. And it turns out that you had legitimate police protection for this, apparently, and young children were going missing in the Vatican gardens constantly. This was so frequent that you had this over emotional reaction. It wasn't an overreaction, obviously it was genuine and necessary, but you had this emotional reaction in the public at the time because the peasant class were just losing their children right and left in Vatican City, and the Vatican Gardens specifically being a hotspot for this abduction process to take place. Now, apparently, it was within the recesses of the subterranean chamber in the Vatican where they were performing this initiation rite ceremony, where each of these popes for generations had been sworn into this Ninth Circle child sacrificing cult through blood ritual. So, what's and again, if you consider the ninth stage or the ninth level of Dante's Inferno, it's treachery. Right. And I discovered this. I felt that was very interesting because I believe Dante's referenced specifically. And if you look into this case of Emanuela Orlandi, we're talking, never solved, right? An unsolved case, still a cold case over, 4 decades, basically. And we have involvement of potentially international terrorist organization who initially tried to take credit for the abduction of Emanuela, but in reality, it turned out to allegedly be sort of like ISIS taking credit for any kind of mass shooting attack or something that transpires on U.S. soil. It seems like this, right? But it turns out that there's a possibility that a serial killer was involved. You have the basically the Vatican covering up a sex scandal that involved what they refer to as ecclesiastical figures. And so again, this is a major plot that I think even the brother of Emanuela Orlandi claimed that he consistently and still to this day is under the impression that the Vatican never admitted as much as they were aware of, and basically the Vatican always remained and maintained strict silence over this case and denied any accusations of involvement or anything such as this. But you look into the details of this, and again, specifically the Vatican sex scandal theory behind the abduction, and it turns out that she wasn't alone, right? We're talking many different girls had gone missing, not just girls, but many different children at this time. And I think a few different girls had actually witnessed her just before she had been abducted as well. So you had some interesting witness statements. But I believe at the end of all of this, nothing was officially solved. And you had Vatican police allegedly recruiting young girls for sex parties, and officials of an unnamed foreign embassy were implicated in being involved in this process. And this was according to basically this victim, right? That a group basically that was victims advocacy group essentially had formed, and they were making the connections that ecclesiastical pedophiles is what they referred to them as, were responsible for essentially having Vatican police and the local gendarmes, which instantly you think of the gendarme connection to the Dutroux affair, right? and how much they were directly involved with propping up that network. But to try and simplify this a little bit more, basically what we have here is a direct reference that I had discovered that I had missed originally, but in hindsight now, after going through the files and the emails, just the correspondence between especially Bannon and Epstein, it turns out this phrase, "abandon hope, all ye who enter," has been around for quite some time. And it happens to actually be referenced directly and appear in an 1885 newspaper article on French aristocratic rape rings that I've referenced once before, but I never went into detail. It's called The Maiden Tributes of Modern Babylon. And shout out to Simon Dovey, the author of Eye of the Chicken Hawk. He has a fascinating website of resource material that's just... It will absolutely, shock you and to your core, right? But it's something that you'll never want to not at least tap into that resource and follow through with everything he's laid out and has to offer as far as his work is concerned. But it turns out, obviously, it was in 1885. You have this individual by the name, apparently he's a member of British High Society, right? And his name is William F. Stead, or Stead, I believe. But he published this series of articles in the Pall Mall Gazette, and it was entitled "The Maiden Tribute of Modern Babylon." And he basically is exposing through these articles what he references as a highly organized child sex trafficking industry operating throughout a network of London brothels. So he says the industry was used to service members of the aristocracy along with other high-powered individuals within institutions, legal, religious, political, with little girls aged anywhere from 5 to 15 years old. And these girls were used to then obviously service this vice and seemingly cultural as well in the way it was being effectively entrenched, right, through the network's influence. And they were specifically, allegedly, according to Simon, they were lusting to violate the chastity of virgins in an extremity of ways, right? So clearly we've referenced many different examples of this. Now, the journalist and member of British High Society was basically... He claims that he himself was a member of the upper echelon of British class, right, of the British class system, and that essentially this was an appeal that he was writing in this context of the articles, an appeal to his peer group to stop violently raping little girls, if not for moral decency, than for that of societal stability, citing a similar culture apparently being ripe amongst French aristocracy and essentially being primarily, just sort of in relation to this, what is referred to as the liberal use of the guillotine, right, during those times, and which is again very interesting timing. So he goes in to basically ask, right? He's basically trying to provoke, essentially an emotional reaction from a specific class, a group, the general public in a way, but obviously the lower classes of the aristocratic structure at the time, to essentially have this sort of out and out reaction and publicly call for accountability at the very least. And so, and it just keep in mind that Stead's status, right, or Stead, his status was apparently so well connected as a scholar, and that he was a founding member of the Cecil Rhodes Society, right, a group that was obviously responsible for incubating these think tanks that to this day are basically the headquarters of the globalist framework, which is the Royal Institute of International Affairs, Chatham House rules, my friend. And then obviously later on, the Council on Foreign Relations. And all of this was basically utilized to create this, what's described as a monolithic Anglo-American bloc, which could strategically, obviously, be exploited and leveraged against us. So this is the final point in the very end of this presentation of this information, because I do think, I know it's long-winded and I apologize, but dear God, it's one of the most fascinating connections that I stumbled upon. And this all came out of Sam just having this kind of a side comment last night on whatever this is. And I instantly brought up the Maiden tribute of Modern Babylon, because he referenced Modern Babylon. And what is referenced in this article? It says the Maw, and remember the myth of the Minoan myth of the Minotaur was a direct reference point in this context as well. And the long form of these articles is very worthwhile in exposing yourself to. But this is kind of the just most important reference that I thought worthwhile. The maw of the London Minotaur is insatiable, and none that go into the secret recesses of his lair return again. After some years wandering in this palace of despair, for hope of rest to solace there is none, nor in of milder pang, save the poisonous anodyne of drink. Most of those ensnared tonight will perish, some of them in horrible torture. London's lust annually uses up many thousands of women, who are literally killed and made away with living sacrifices, slain in the service of vice. That may be inevitable, and with that I have nothing to do. But I do ask that those doomed to the house of evil fame shall not be trapped into it unwillingly, and that none shall be beguiled into the chamber of death before they are of an age to read the inscription above the portal. All hope abandon ye who enter here. That's the inscription above the portal of the sacrificial chamber that's being referenced in the context of the Maiden tribute of Modern Babylon. If the daughters of the people must be served up as dainty morsels to minister to the passions of the rich, let them at least attain an age when they can understand the nature of the sacrifice which they are asked to make. And this is the final point. And that crime of the most ruthless and abominable description is constantly and systematically practiced in London without let or hindrance. I am in a position to prove from my own personal knowledge, a knowledge purchased at a cost of which I prefer not to speak. Those crimes may be roughly classified as follows: the sale and purchase and violation of children, the procuration of virgins, the entrapping and ruin of women, the international slave trade in girls, atrocities, brutalities, and unnatural crimes. And this is, again, the report that was basically on this secret commission, basically, and essentially written by William F. Stead in 1885. So thank you, man. Honestly, I'm sorry that it was long-winded, but dear God, do you not think that is one of the most extraordinary things that you've ever even heard, especially with the direct reference point to the communication between Bannon and Epstein.
Didn't you say there was a ninth circle reference in there or something?
Yeah, and I just obviously that was a part of the reference that Epstein responded to abandon hope all ye who enter ninth circle was Epstein's response. And yeah. And
all right. Well, I just wanted to touch on that. Now we've talked a little bit about Kabbalah. We'll bring it right back to that, tying all these concepts together. You talk about ninth circle. Most people think ninth circle of hell. Well, in the Kabbalistic tree of life, usually how it's visualized, it's by circles that kind of connect to each other. And I believe there's 9 total, I think, or something like that. Also, keep in mind, if we're thinking the occult as above, so below, there's many people who talk about this idea of like a tree of death. So if we are talking about the 9 circles of hell, I mean, come on, that is the, if you are to do like the opposite, it's like the descending, because the idea of Kabbalah is like this is the emanations that come forth from God, and it splits to the different whatever the fuck. But anyways, the 9th Sephirot, because they're referred to as Sephirots, is Yesod. It is the bridge between spiritual and physical realms. It's associated with the moon, representing subconscious and the emotional aspects of existence. It acts as a channel for divine energy, facilitating the manifestation of spiritual ideas into the physical world. It's often viewed as a source of dreams and imagination, linking higher spiritual concepts to tangible reality. So I don't know, I thought that was worth mentioning if we were trying to think of what its inversion is. Perhaps
Sephiroth, right? Is the main antagonist in Final Fantasy VII, right? And he was always one of my favorite villains that in the game series, especially. I played like 7 and 8 specifically were my favorites when I was a kid. And the guardian forces I've mentioned before, right? Quetzalcoatl, Shiva, these various deities of ancient religious context. You also have to consider that basically Sephiroth, there's a quote of what he essentially, his character represents in the game series. There was one soldier named Sephiroth who was better than the rest, but when he found out about the terrible experiments that made him, he began to hate Shinra. And then over time, he began to hate everything. And I just thought that's kind of interesting philosophically in terms of how you could apply that, kind of interesting sort of just in terms of his building block for his character and the perspective that he represented, right, in a real way. That gaming series was legitimately Illuminati confirmed, in my opinion, and tapping into the occult in many different ways. So the fact that Sephiroth is even a character is fascinating, but I do think the fact that he was created, right, and by experimentation process and then grew to hate the individuals who were responsible. It's just interesting connecting that into mind control and the Kabbalistic ancient Jewish mysticism and the levels of potentially DID being associated with the Kabbalistic tree of life and the interlocking root systems and what they described it as, and it makes a lot of sense, right? And I'm not at all shocked that revelation of the method exists in childhood pop culture, right? But anyway.
Well, Austin, you ready to get out of here? You want to get a little more time with your wife today as opposed to last week?
I'm so tired anyway. I did that show super late last night and then woke up this morning and did like 2.5 hours with the Rabbit Hole podcast, like super early for me. And I had to end up apologizing because I went so schizophrenic. I was just like, I'm too tired to not pull myself back. And yeah, it was interesting, but it was a good time, and I always appreciate her. But I'm ready if you are, brother.
Let's do exhausted. It. Yeah, we need to get you set up with a Daily Show. I'm telling you, it'll help you keep your thoughts in line. You only have to bite off 1 or 2 a week, especially if we get a few people, maybe me, you, Jacob, or something like that. I don't know, just spitballing ideas. We have quite a while before we do that. But hey, might be good to have you join here sometime soon. But,
I would love to, buddy.
with that, guys, no, actually, I'm not going to end it. But Austin, where can people find you at?
Yeah, I mean, you guys definitely, the Underclass podcast and obviously the Patreon is the best place to support me. I think we just today posted episode 53, so it's getting up there already. Honestly, I'm pretty proud of it. It's definitely been a surreal experience, and I'm very grateful for all of my shows at this point, and the relationships that I've cultivated along the way as well. So I appreciate all of you, and I love you, brother.
Love you too, bud. For those who want to support what I'm doing, leave a like, share, subscribe, comment, leave a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. You can find the show on YouTube, Rumble, all the major audio podcatchers, Twitter as well. On Twitter, that's at TowerGangJose. Everywhere else, just search No Way Jose. You'll find it. And if you want to support the show the best way you can do that with money over at patreon.com/NoWayJose2020. The lowest level is $2, gives you access to early episodes. I try to do about 1 to 2 of those per week. Try to keep about 3 to 4 behind the paywall at any given time. You also get access to the ad-free RSS feed. You get access to Telegram. You get access to pre-show, post-show, which we're about to go to, and video calls on this show right here, Already Dead, which is on Tuesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. I go a big shout-out to my sponsors, which is the highest level of my Patreon. It's a big thank you for their support of my previous co-host entire gang at Learn to Toad, also at Brigadies, at ZOVRCK, at _Invisible, Tim Tull, at Jolly Klebo, big fan of the show, Torme, at Wayne Tackis, One Undercover Kids, No Free Lunch, Jack, Mark Vestibule, and Jacob Wintergrad of the Biblical Anarchy Podcast. With that, guys, we're going to get out of here. We're going to go hang out with our patrons in the after show, talk to them about esoteric religious concepts. It'll be a fun time. Join us next time and stop being poor. Give me $2 or Austin 3 because he's a Jew. We'll see you in the next one. Love you all. Bye-bye.